Hey, and we are live Sunday, coming right at you. It's once again, this is Mike, Sunspot, See Another Side, American Ghost Walks, hanging out with my brethren in Weird, and I'm talking about my literal brethren, my sister, Allison, from American Ghost Walks.
Sunday.
That's right, Sunday. And
Big Daddy.
my
Mike Hubie.
my rock and roll weird family, Wendy and Scott. How is everybody feeling on this fine Sunday afternoon? It actually is if you had a chance to venture outside with your masks on, it's a pretty nice day.
Beautiful day.
It's beautiful day in quarantine.
I'm feeling unkempt and pale.
Ah.
Oh, we're starting to feel ripped from doing all these push-ups.
Yeah.
And,
Oh, that's
the
right.
workout plan.
Still working. You guys are still working on the old push-ups. Myself, if you haven't seen, I haven't shaved now in 5 weeks.
I like it.
I want to see what happens.
You look like a mountain man.
I look like Bob Seger.
Or like a Scotsman.
Like a
You know,
mud
just put your
Scotsman.
kilt on.
That's right.
A Highlander. You look like a Highlander.
I'll take
That's it.
that. I'll take that instead of a mountain man. Okay, coming in. Oh, Christine Hanker-Perv says it's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. Thank you, Christine. It's nice to hear from you. And Joyce Spitzen also says, woohoo! And so, Joyce, we hope you are doing well as well. And just hope that everybody is doing all right with, obviously, we are all still stuck inside or not supposed to hang out with other people. And so now...
They can't stop us from Skyping. We're going to Skype every day.
They cannot stop us from speaking to each other over the internet. And, this is going to be episode 292 of the See You on the Other Side podcast. And we wanted to just talk about some of our favorite personal UFO stories, as well as stories that we get from our listeners and the people who have been checking out the podcast. And I got to say, I feel like ufology is a contentious field. You know what I mean? Because you have people at several levels. Because ufology is different than ghosts in a certain way, because ghosts require require that leap of faith right away, in that there's the idea there's a soul or an afterlife. Like, you're immediately jumping to that leap that there's a soul or an afterlife. Whereas in UFOs, there's a variety of levels of belief that you can get to. You guys know what? Like, there's starting with just there's something weird in the sky. Okay,
right.
What could that be?
Just unidentified something.
Right.
Anything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you could start out with just something weird in the sky. You're like, okay, well, is it an alien? I don't know. It could be a foreign spaceship. It could be not a foreign spaceship. It could be a foreign airplane. It could be a spy satellite. Now it
could be a human craft.
Right.
Could be swamp gas or a weather balloon.
Right.
Any kind of visual, anomaly.
And if you guys want the real story of the swamp gas, you're going to have to listen to our episode with Mark O'Connell, the guy that actually wrote the book on Dr. J. Allen Hynek. Of course,
Great book.
They didn't use any of that for the Project Blue Book History Channel series, of course.
Yeah,
but
it's not based on any facts
whatsoever. But it is a lot of fun. It's like an X-Files kind of show, but it is completely fictionalized a version of Dr. Hynek's life.
They should start putting the quotation marks around History Channel, like fancy ketchup.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Right.
I've never thought of the History Channel as fancy ketchup before, but I mean, to me, it's more of the hunts compared to the National Geographic Heinz. When you're comparing the ketchups of quality here.
But you would definitely recommend Mark O'Connell's book, Close Encounters, man.
It's really good.
And it's thoroughly researched.
It's a great book, and we were talking to him a couple years before he released the book, and he was, talking about writing it, and he goes in the whole story of the swamp gas in the See on the Other Side episode. We interviewed Mark O'Connell for 2 episodes. Early on, we talked about his writing for Star Trek, and then we talked about his research into J. Allen Hynek and why the swamp gas, like everybody was like, J. Allen Hynek is such a debunker because of the swamp gas thing. But when you listen to the actual story, you'll find out that Hynek isn't the bad guy that everybody said he was. He's not the wild debunker that everybody said he was. So we'll have to put that link in the show notes. So starting out at that level, we can start with there's just something weird in the sky level. That's interesting. Then there's the level of we don't think it's a human craft in the sky and it's an alien. And that is a leap of faith. Then we're starting a leap of faith. But I mean, does anybody really think that aliens don't exist at all elsewhere in the universe? Are there people that are like, okay, we are the only life. Earth is the only life in the entire universe.
I think that's a minority position.
Yeah.
I mean, I think scientists today will say that there has to be intelligent life somewhere in the vast universe. They don't know if it's reached Earth, and some of them would argue that point, but they don't argue the point anymore that there isn't other life.
Right.
Because I think that's some part of the idea of how we got here. We evolved from some speck of life that came flying in on a meteorite that took hold on Earth.
Well, I mean, that's a controversial theory,
Right.
Scott. That's panspermia. And there are some scientists that put that forward, but there's a lot of scientists that don't like that idea either, that we were seeded somehow.
Well,
That's true.
Well,
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, you think back when this was just molten lava. Well, life had to have come from somewhere then. I mean, we have to avoid the religious conversation.
Right. That's exactly because I was just going to say, saying that there's no life out there is like saying, I know something that we don't know.
We couldn't possibly know.
But then
Right.
that's what faith is, right? I mean,
Right.
Sure.
essentially. So never mind. We won't.
Right.
Yeah,
we won't go down that road.
I think people think that there was some chemical reaction that happened here that was fairly unique, that just came about from the primordial soup. And they don't like to say that, maybe there was life somewhere else, and, some of those bacteria or viruses hitched a ride and then found a new home here. They prefer to think that, some kind of chemical reaction brought it about here, and it rather than it being somewhere else first.
Sure. And I mean, panspermia might be, controversial, the idea of it. I think it's more controversial, the idea that we were seeded by someone else, rather than the idea that the chemical reaction could have come from something from a meteor or a comet coming by the planet. I think it's to say that we were planted here, like in Prometheus.
Well, right. I'm not talking about not talking about
even
5
Dan
million
even
years.
Dan agrees that there is life elsewhere.
Not talking about Quatermass or anything like that. Just the idea that even bacteria accidentally got here and started it all
Sure.
is controversial to some scientists. But certainly the idea that we were intentionally put
Planted.
here is way out there.
Well, so now we're talking about more levels of belief, because the thing is,
Yeah.
so you're thinking, okay, life exists out there in the universe, and other people, everybody's like, yeah, that's got to be true, right? That's got to be true. And then you go to, okay, now that life is like flying by and visiting our planet, kind of like we do like on safari or something like that.
Yeah.
And then there's the next level, that they've made contact and they're here.
Right.
And that's the X-Files level, that they've
Right,
made,
right.
they made a deal with the government, and they're keeping it from us. That's the disclosure level, I think, of belief. So we come to like, okay, yes, weird things can happen in the sky. Okay, sure, they might be aliens. 3, the aliens are here, the government knows about them, and they're hiding them from us.
Right.
So
And then, even beyond that, is the idea of, exopolitics, that we have to prepare to enter into a federation of planets or something cool like that.
The Anunnaki.
Yes. Oh, the Anunnaki. That's a whole
How
new
can we
other
forget about
thing
the
that
Anunnaki?
we were
Our
the
friend,
slave
the
race
Anunnaki.
of the Anunnaki. But
David Icke.
Let's even David Icke, yeah. Let's even go beyond that. But talk about, so there's some people that are like, oh no, it's not nuts and bolts craft. They're not from another planet. They're actually fairies or demons who are deceiving you into thinking their intelligence is from another planet, but they really originate from here and are just pulling the wool over our eyes, presenting themselves as kind space brothers when they really want our eternal souls, or they just want to mess with us like fairies.
I think that's a fun.
Right.
That's always a fun theory. It reminds me of this game called Dark Conspiracy that was a role playing game that was in the 90s, and it was the idea that
Oh man, you love those 90s role playing games.
because 90s role playing games were super dark, and that's what made them
Yeah.
fun. Like they had to be
like what was the vampire one?
Vampire the Masquerade, girl. That was the game that we used to play, and that was you dress up like vampire, like you played the bad guy. And that was the idea. So that was the first time, instead of being the noble heroes who would slay the dragon in role-playing, you would be the vampires who had to feed on humans. And
You're the LARPers from What We Do in the Shadows.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I was a total LARPer. I lived the dream.
I will vouch for that. What was your character name, Mike?
Oh, I was the storyteller. So I wasn't just a character. I was like 10 different. It was like 10 different characters. So when
You didn't take like your baptism or your confirmation name, Cyprian, and make that into your vampire
There you
character?
go.
That's pretty
That'd
good.
been a
I love
one.
that.
But the thing is, that since the live action game, you would have the people who would play their characters, and then I would have like 4 or 5 people working with me who would play different other characters throughout the evening. And you would like turn your friend's basement into a nightclub. We go to Spencer Gifts and get different colored lights and stuff like that. And we couldn't. There's no booze. We were all under 21, and but you'd have things that looked like wine or non-alcoholic wine and stuff like that we'd serve, and then we'd all like just play the characters and do
Hey,
the thing.
there's no age limit on animal blood. I think you were
That's
skipping
true.
out.
We could have
Got
done
to
animal
the
blood.
butcher, Mike.
But okay, enough. The thing is, I was a LARPer, and that's. But
I could go on for hours.
But
How much are you committed to your character? I'm done.
When we had John Tenney on the show to talk about when like UFOs came back in 2017, and we were talking about when the New York Times even thought it was cool, like to talk about UFOs again. He was mentioning that things are like happen in cycles, and UFOs were huge in the 1990s. Wendy, remember all the people like in college that had T-shirts that said things like "Take me to your dealer"? It was like a Roswell alien smoking a doob.
I think a lot of it too had to do with the popularity of X-Files at the time.
Oh yeah.
Because that was the.
So yeah, that came back 93 or so.
Yeah.
And then just grew and grew in popularity.
Mm-hmm.
And then Ancient Aliens in more recent years.
Right. Yeah.
So the aliens are back, but the thing is, in the 90s, it was dark. Like it was cool to be the bad guy, and so like Dark Conspiracy was this game where you had the demons and the extraterrestrials team up together to try to hunt down humans, like to change the human course of human history. And so that was. Like, that's what makes me think of when I think of when you talk to certain religious people and they say, like, well, UFOs and aliens and stuff, those are just demons trying to take your soul.
That's right. That's why the Vatican has observatories all over the world.
And
Think about it.
That's level 4. Well, no, but the thing is, the same people who believe that usually believe that the Vatican, that the Pope is like a tool of the devil. Because even, we were talking about how most scientists, the majority opinion is probably there is life, somewhere else in the universe, and that is also the opinion of the the church, even the Vatican. In 2012, the Vatican sponsors a meeting to discuss the chances of extraterrestrial life in Vatican City. They were saying that finding extraterrestrial life is like a detective chase, a crime to be solved, and we're getting very close to the answer. And this is a guy that was head of the Steward Observatory in the University of Arizona's Department of Astronomy in Tucson. And he's at this Vatican conference where these archbishops and priests are discussing the implications, the religious and spiritual implications that life exists elsewhere in the universe. And so what's one thing that the Pope and Richard Dawkins can agree on? It's the idea that there's probably extraterrestrial life in the universe. And that's probably the only thing they'll ever agree on. And so that's what makes, I think that's what makes this interesting. Oh, and Stephanie comes in and she's like, the Pope is an alien.
Nice.
He might be. He might be. Funny enough, we did have an episode of the podcast with the Reverend John Polk, and he claims that he's been visited many times by the people in space, and that Jesus was an alien. So the Pope being an alien, that's not even quite off the mark from people we have had conversations with in the past. Okay. Now, we should probably start, the idea is some of our personal favorite UFO stories and maybe our own UFO experiences. And
I have one.
So let's start with people that have actually had a UFO experience here. And Allison, what can we debunk for you?
Okay, well, I'm not saying it's the mothership. In fact, I don't think it is. I just don't know what it is. I've seen...
Wendy Scott and I believe in the mothership because we've seen George Clinton's tour bus.
Right.
Yeah.
So we absolutely believe in the mothership. I just don't think it's alien.
I absolutely believe in George Clinton.
Yes.
He is awesome.
He has a superhuman abilities of performance.
Yes, that's right.
His
And
whole
great hair.
clan.
Yes.
He's got superhuman funk.
Yeah, definitely. Atomic Dog. Still, I listen to that almost every day. I love that song.
All right.
Anyway, so besides George Clinton, I did see something extraordinary. Now, I know it wasn't a drone. I've seen drones before, during the day and at night. I've also seen Chinese lanterns, and it wasn't that either. So I'm not sure what it was. And it was a broad daylight sighting. And actually, it happened when I was still working at a traditional school. And so I was driving to work, running a little late. And it was about 7:25 in the morning on Monday, September 26, 2016. I know because as soon as I got to school, I emailed Mike. Well, actually, first what I did is I brought my class to the classroom and we had a quick write. And what did we write about? We wrote about something extraordinary that has happened to you. And I just took that opportunity to write down all the facts as I could remember them. Right. And then as soon as I had done that, I copied that to Mike and sent it so that I would have a record.
And I didn't have much, I wasn't able to answer it or pay a lot of attention because that was the date of my daughter's birth. So Allison's in the middle of having a UFO sighting. I had other things to worry about, unfortunately, rather than your UFO sighting, Allison.
Yeah, what I wrote to you in this email is I saw some UFOs today at about 7:25 a.m. and I couldn't wait to tell you. Maybe it's a sign. Is it baby time? It's funny that it was baby time.
It was baby time.
Anyway, I don't know why that would have any relation to aliens or whatever these things were.
Well, just to jump in really quickly, I think that's fascinating. That happened on
the arrival date.
So there are some people out there that wonder if aliens and UFO sightings are getting mixed up with angel sightings, or if there's some kind of a family guardian angel connection there. And Sheryl Crow even has a great song. First song on her second album is called Maybe Angels, and it's actually about aliens. Yeah,
Well,
interesting.
and I mean, I don't know why I would connect the two things, but I just, anytime anything peculiar happens, I guess I was like, maybe it's some kind of sign. So I wrote this, and then of course he didn't get back to me right away because it was baby time.
Yeah.
But anyway, I said below is what I wrote for the kids today. So remember, these are fourth graders. So some of this might sound a little obvious, but it's written for fourth graders. Below is what I wrote
So
for
you
the
guys
kids
out there,
today during
you
our
guys out there in
quick
the
write.
listening audience, it's actually for you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about at your speed. Something amazing happened. Sorry. Something amazing happened to me this morning. No, my brother's baby didn't come yet, unfortunately. Well, actually, it did.
Yeah.
But anyway, this is what I wrote that morning.
So
It
we've
was
already
something
debunked.
else.
We've already debunked your story.
I was just that part. I was driving to school on Highway 43 southbound when I saw something strange in the sky. Actually, it was two somethings. I wondered, were they planes? But I couldn't stop and look because I was on the expressway. That means emergency stopping only. The objects were pretty high up. That's why I thought they were planes. But I actually saw two planes go by this morning also. These other objects didn't seem to be moving, and they didn't have the blinking lights that planes have to have by law. They were like two groups of three bright white lights hovering there. One was much lower than the other and off to the right. What were they? I wish I could have stopped and taken some video. By the time I got off the expressway, the lights were in back of me and seemed to be getting smaller. I think maybe they were flares, but I'm not sure. They seemed to fade out instead of coming down like they were on parachutes. They also didn't really seem to move at all, just hanging motionless in the sky for at least 5 minutes. What do you think they were? So I have some details to add to this account. So I can't say how high up there they were. I mean, I was coming under an overpass, and they seemed to be before the overpass and above the overpass, but it's really hard to tell how high something is up in the sky. So I know they were above the overpass, but I'm not sure of the exact height, and that would seem to make it difficult to judge the size. But I know also that besides the fact of them being like three circular lights in a row, there was a dark rectangular form that they seemed to be seated in. So it was like a gray rectangle that had three white circles in it. And then offset and to the right was another gray rectangle that looked exactly the same. So that doesn't seem like flares. It doesn't seem like anything of consequence. It's just, they were just hovering there. So what do you guys make of that?
I would say that's unidentified.
Yes.
Those flying objects were definitely unidentifiable.
I'll also say I wish I saw that too.
Yeah.
I've never seen anything cool like that in the sky.
It was very bizarre. And I was like, aren't other people seeing this? And, it's life. You got to go to work. You got to do your thing. You can't just like, I'm going to like swerve off the highway and take video. I did try to take something, but I couldn't drive on the expressway and point the camera to.
It's not.
I made a half-hearted attempt and dropped my phone.
And you call yourself a researcher.
Hey, by the way, speaking of researchers, we got a shout from Ryan Sprague. Who's of the Somewhere in the Skies podcast.
Yes,
so shout out to Ryan. Thanks for. Yeah, he was a guest on our show, and he's always talking UFOs. So you should check out his podcast sometime.
Also, you can see Ryan on the CW's Mysteries Decoded show.
Yeah,
he's on like half the shows in the first season of it, and you can see that for free if you just look up CW. You can just go to the CW website and watch all their shows for free. Anytime.
Awesome.
So make sure you watch Mysteries Decoded because Ryan's a great researcher and a super fun guy.
The really neat thing was that Wendy and I bumped into him in Los Angeles, totally randomly in a coffee shop. What was the name of the coffee shop? Coffee for Sasquatch. Of course.
Yeah.
What?
And in like one of the biggest cities in the country.
Yeah.
Like we randomly ran into him. But anyway, shout out. And you were shouting someone else, Mike?
No, I was just I was saying if you were a real researcher, like I said, John Keel would have died for that picture, Allison. And so the fact that you didn't risk your life, it's okay. It's just you're not John Keel.
It's shameful, I know.
But I think in this day and age, John Keel probably would be walking around with a GoPro constantly.
Yeah.
Like recording, right?
Strapped to his head.
And also,
yeah, exactly.
I think John Keel's obviously brilliant and great writer and stuff like that. But I also think we tend to. I was thinking about this after our conversation with Ken Walker, he's done this amazing Bigfoot recreation, and you'll have heard about him in our episode on Big Fur. And when I'm doing research on the Patterson-Gimlin Bigfoot film, we tend to like Patterson and Gimlin, like those guys were, they were hardcore researchers and stuff. We tend to forget everyone's failures and just think about the successes, and so we tend to canonize the people that came before us when there was plenty of mistakes and missteps and things like that. I thought about that too.
Right, but those things aren't interesting.
Right. Especially when you're thinking 50
and we all have our foibles.
Well, of course we all have our foibles, but whenever you're looking to the past, we always have to think about, like, let's look at the totality of evidence and remember that history is written by the victors and the whole thing. The other thing that made me think about that is when I was doing research into where the Amityville Horror book was written. So where did Jay Anson write the book? Because Jay Anson never met any members of the family. He was only given a series of tapes, and he wrote the book based on the tapes. And so when I read Lloyd Auerbach's book, another See You on the Other Side alumni, when I read Lloyd's book and he talked about why the Amityville Horror was a hoax, he was using evidence of the moon, when they were talking about a full moon, it wasn't the full moon. When they were talking about weather.
He was finding cracks in their story based on like weather and science and things.
And he was doing
that sounds familiar.
It does. And Allison, you and Sam Moranto, who we're going to go to Sam's story next. Sam Moranto is the head of Illinois MUFON. We're going to talk about that next. But the reason that I thought it was interesting is because Jay Anson, he's talking about the process of writing. And remember, Jay Anson only died a couple years after the book was released. Like, he didn't live a long time. He didn't even live long enough to probably enjoy the fame and the money that he would have gotten from the movies and stuff. But Jay Anson writes, he's like, yeah, so I don't get the weather right. So, and this is before Lloyd Auerbach was trying to bust it for being a hoax. He was saying, yeah, I didn't pay attention to the moon or the weather or anything like that. Like, I just did what I could do to make it the best story I could. And you're thinking, okay, Jay Anson is not a reporter. He's not here to tell.
He's a novelist.
He's a novelist. Right. He's not there to try to create this true story to get it as accurate as possible. That us as paranormal investigators, that's what we want, right? We want the truth so that we can figure out if there is something paranormal here. He's like, I just want to write a good story, man. And when I read that, I was like, oh. Like, it just made so much sense that I figured.
Well, that's the divide we come to. I think so many people today are just in it for a good story. It's not that I don't like good stories. I just think stories are better when you give me some truth.
Right, exactly.
Jamie says, "Hey, fam," and
What's up, Jamie?
Hey, Jamie, how you doing today?
That's my cousin. Thanks for joining us.
Right on.
But yeah, there's plenty of fiction stories out there, so we don't need to create. I mean, let's let the truth be the truth. At least in its purest form. You can make fiction can be inspired by it, but like if you're reporting it, then actually report the details and the facts.
Right.
Yeah.
Amen, sister. Amen.
Yeah. And speaking of people that do look for facts often, Dan comes in. He says, "I have two stories. I think Scott has heard them about UFO stories." So, Scott, you're going to have to, if you've heard them, We're going to have to hear about them in a little bit, man. Okay. So I kind of just wanted to bring that up because when we talk about, like, we lionize these old guys, and I just want to make sure that we keep everything in perspective because everybody's human. And when we're searching for the final thing, which is as many facts and truth as we can get at, we always have to keep those kind of things in mind. I kind of wanted to tell a story that I just remembered today. I didn't even remember it, but I'd written this down on January 3rd.
But it was beamed into your head.
It was. Right. So January 3rd, 2008. And this is why I think this is interesting. It's because, number one, I had no recollection of this whatsoever. And number two, there was a coincidence later. So this is what I wrote in my journal that day. At noon of January 3rd, 2008, my wife and I go to the Cabo Rojo Lighthouse. Now, Cabo Rojo is on the southwestern edge of Puerto Rico. And so Puerto Rico is about the size of Connecticut. So it's, if you get the southwestern edge, I mean, it's a couple 100 miles long. And we're on the southwestern edge in the Caribbean. And Cabo Rojo is like this white sand beach. It's almost like the beach from the movie. Who's the director?
The Beach.
Yeah.
Train Spotting. The British guy.
Guy Ritchie. No.
Train Spotting was Slumdog Millionaire. Oh, I can't think of him. Shallow Grave. Anyway, but the beach movie. It's like that. It's this really super blue water, calm waves, white sand, and then some dude will pull his boat like right up to it, like jamming music and like throwing beer cans out the side, like so. So it's not it's a very pretty area, but people also.
But it's not always pristine.
It's definitely not always pristine. But we're at this beach and it's a beautiful day, and we go to the lighthouse there. It's a famous lighthouse in Cabo Rojo, El Faro. And the director of the lighthouse is David. The views are spectacular. It's hot as balls. It's high 80s. And so I write this down after I saw it. We're walking around the lighthouse. I'm taking pictures. But then I see this object far away in the sky, and it almost looks like a blimp, but it was tremendously high in the sky, so high and so far away that we couldn't be quite sure of what it was. It definitely didn't look like a cloud, even though it was completely white and high enough to be a cloud. But the rest of the clouds had some kind of softness and transparency to them, and this cloud didn't. It was definitely unusual, and I thought it might be a UFO. Actually, what I thought it might be was some kind of alien or government ship that was up there and disguised as a cloud. But it was
nice.
Whoa, dude.
Just different enough so that if you looked at it, you could tell. I was trying to take a picture of it, but I couldn't get a good picture. And I was so enamored with the natural beauty of the place, I forgot about the unnatural beauty of what we were seeing. It was probably a cloud, or maybe
that's what they want you to do.
Yeah,
it was probably a cloud, or maybe a blimp that was very high, but it looked just different enough from the other clouds to be interesting. Now, I wrote that down at like 12:15, or whenever it happened. An hour later, we're like driving to our next location after spending some time on the beach and going to the lighthouse, and it's the extraterrestrial highway. It's named the extraterrestrial highway. In Puerto Rico.
That's awesome.
So, like, I see a UFO. I mean, I don't know if it was a UFO. It was just a cloud that didn't look like the rest of the clouds, but it struck me enough.
Well, it was a UFO then, because you couldn't identify it.
Definitely unidentified. And it struck me enough that I had to write something down about it. And then an hour later, we're driving, and this is the extraterrestrial highway where a ton of UFO sightings have happened in Puerto Rico previously. And Puerto Rico is in the Bermuda.
And is that near the world famous Arecibo telescope as well?
It's on the other side of the island.
Oh, bummer. Wanted to connect those two.
But that doesn't mean you connect it to the Bermuda Triangle, because so one of my favorite Bermuda Triangle stories actually happens not very far away from Cabo Rojo, as someone's flying back from Santiago in the Dominican Republic. And this happened in 1980, And Jose Maldonado Torres was flying a small plane back from Santiago to San Juan. And to get there, you got to go around Cabo Rojo in this area. And by the time you get to Cabo Rojo, then the next part is you're over the island the rest of the time. But before he was over the island, just as he's getting back into Puerto Rican airspace, the official report states that he's complaining about a weird object. He could see this weird thing, and he said it was interfering with his navigational equipment. That was the last message they got. The plane was never seen again, and 2 people, him and his co-pilot, disappeared that day. And the thing is, the father of the other passenger of the plane was an assistant chief in the Puerto Rico Aero Police, and he was an accomplished pilot himself, and he was one of the people who was leading flights searching for his son. And his personal affidavit, that he gave the Aerospace Commission, he says that when they were listening to the tape, he said they described the weird object that was interfering with their navigational equipment as glowing. And that was the last report they got. And, they kind of disappeared in that area. So that's what I thought was, I thought it was kind of an interesting thing that I had seen. And I didn't even know that story when I was there. I was not thinking about UFOs when I was there. It was 12, so I wasn't drinking yet. And I saw something weird. And I completely forgot I saw something weird that I had to write about it. And then 12 years later, I'm just looking through my journal. I'm like, oh, I bet somebody emailed me something about UFOs or something like that. And then I found that story. And then I'm like, wait, but then there's the Bermuda Triangle story as they were re-entering Puerto Rican airspace. So they'd be coming from that direction. Anyway, Cabo Rojo, place for UFOs, place for beautiful white sand beaches.
Yeah. Well, and Puerto Rico is known for UFOs elsewhere.
Yes.
On the other side, too, with the Arecibo telescope, which was famously portrayed in the X-Files.
Yes, X-Files. And that's also where the climax to the movie GoldenEye takes place.
That's right.
Pierce Brosnan and Sean Bean fight at the Arecibo radio telescope. And it's funny. So GoldenEye comes out in like 1995. I think we were freshmen in college when. And I had a professor of astronomy that year, a teaching assistant in astronomy who had just spent 6 months in Arecibo while they were shooting GoldenEye. And he said that
cool.
he's like, oh, it's pretty cool they did it. He's like, Pierce Brosnan's kind of a crybaby though. And I'm like, what? He's like, he was just always complaining about stuff. And I'm just like, Pierce Brosnan, you're breaking my heart. And it just made me laugh to hear that. I forgot that he's like, oh yeah, he's like, I was there when they shot GoldenEye. I'm like, what? Awesome! I'm like, James
I can't remember what a dandy he was during Remington Steele in his younger years.
He was a dandy.
I can believe that.
You're right. I can believe it too.
Kind of a namsy pams.
We haven't had a chance to listen to. I wanted to say we were talking about Sam Moranto from Illinois. MUFON, and I want to play you guys Sam's UFO story that he called in and shared with us. So let's take a listen to that right now.
Hello, you guys. This is Sam, and you wanted a UFO story? Well, this was our account, Sam and Julie, back on Friday, May the 2nd of 2003. We were driving southbound on LaGrange Road at the intersection of 159th Street in Orland Park. To our left, in the southeast section, above the Pep Boys, Julie noticed a large orange orb pop in and all sorts of discharges around it, much like looking like fireworks displayed all the way around it, and then oozing from the bottom, small orbs exactly the same color. So we watched it, and it was in the sky while we were sitting there at the light. And as we moved away, we were watching it for probably about 7 minutes. And as it moved, it went through the complete spectrum of light, and it changed color. It moved across the sky, going westbound and going southwest, and then disappeared. The whole observation was somewhere between 5 and 7 minutes until it was completely out of range. I called the police department to see if there were any reports. They gave me notice that there were absolutely no reports. But yet I received a call later stating that, yes, there were reports, but it was children with balloons. And when I asked the person why did they make that statement, they says they were told to. And that was it in a very brief summary. And by the way, we had a north to south wind at 13 miles an hour. There were multiple witnesses. We weren't the only ones seeing it. Thank you. Bye.
Oh, man. Now, Sam, first of all, Sam's a super nice guy and he's a lot of fun. And we've enjoyed talking to him in the podcast before and at paranormal conventions. But the thing about that story,
most importantly, he's a meticulous researcher.
Well,
and he doesn't take anything at face value.
If you listen to the end of that call, he goes in and says, "Well, there was a north." He talks about the direction of the wind and the wind speed.
Right.
And so it's like he goes in and he tells that he gives you the direction of the wind, the wind speed, and also the fact that somebody called into MUFON or whatever, calls him and says that, they had seen those objects too, and they were told to tell them that it was children with balloons. And so so that story has two levels. Number one, Sam saw something weird over at Pep Boys, but number two, that somebody had told another experiencer that it was just balloons, and if anybody asks you about it, it's just balloons. That,
oh boy,
that makes me think about, the X-Files episode where
Jose Chung from outer space.
Jose Chung's from outer space, where like Jesse the Body Ventura.
That's my favorite.
And
mine too.
Jesse the Body Ventura and Alex Trebek show up as Men in Black.
Classic.
Awesome.
And Jesse the Body Ventura is like, "What you saw was the planet Venus." And I'm trying as a 5'8" guy, I'm trying to tell everybody what a 6'6" guy, like I'm trying to sound like a 6'6" guy who has
You're doing a pretty good job.
Very different diaphragm in order to create sound. But the thing is, like, that makes me think, somebody told, like, they call the, Sam, what I like about Sam too is he sees something, he calls the police. Because what might it be? Well, even if it's children's balloons, or even if it's alien, like he calls the cops. Like you see something that makes you crap your pants. Like we talked about, like with our mother a couple weeks ago when we were talking about their ghost story. They heard this knocking at the door. They were living across the street from a cemetery, and a knocking at the door in the middle of the night gets a phone call to the cops. Even though Bob had a shotgun, is ready to cap an ass.
When witnesses do that, it gives their story an extra level of credibility. They're willing to go on the record. Yeah. And it's sad that so few stories have that component, because it really makes you wonder. I mean, I didn't call the cops because, all right, what I saw didn't seem to be of any danger to anyone. But, when you see something that, puts the fear of God in you, what do? You call the cops. So when people report seeing extraordinary, terrifying things, well, your next question to them would be, what did you do? Did you call the cops?
Right.
And if they didn't, why didn't they call?
Well, Sam Moranto obviously doesn't have that problem, because the thing is, he's not going to report it to MUFON. He is MUFON. So he's got to go to the next level. He's not just like, he's like, oh, I'll just send it to MUFON. Like, no, you are MUFON. Yeah. Now Dan says that his the entire area of Palos, Orland Park, and the surrounding area is steeped in legend, lore, and UFO stories. That is the area I'd like to get you down to, along with everybody else, to investigate. Well, I think we're going to have to get down to there, and we're going to have to do some investigation. Scott, have you been down there checking out the UFOs?
So not for that reason, but yeah, that is not far from Resurrection Mary territory. A lot of haunted locations, and as Dan says, lots of different lore and mysterious history, including like some serious connections to the Manhattan Project down there. And you always wonder when we start to mess with stuff that might be out of human control. Maybe aliens are checking in to make sure we're not messing anything up and blowing up the earth.
Hey, all right, somebody's looking out for us.
We hope. But yeah, no, that area is really awesome. And Dan's been wanting to get us to do a whole day-long investigation, all of us down there, going to a whole bunch of different sites.
Well, let's do it. Yeah, what are we waiting for? Oh, I forgot. Pandemic.
Right. We can't get outside yet. At least we'd all have to stay 6 feet away from each other while we went down there and wear our masks.
Well, that gives us time to also
have hockey's.
Well,
yeah, it gives us time to also gear up with not just ghost hunting gear, but also Geiger counters, just in case.
Yeah. And in the meantime, I'll be getting the Sunspot branded masks made so we can wear those. Maybe we can see you on the other side.
That would make it like so post-apocalyptic cool. I would love it. Yes. We got to do it.
If we had masks and Geiger counters, it's like we are walking around in A Boy and His Dog. That kind of world right there.
Right.
All right. So I kind of, I wanted to read a story that was written by one of our patrons. And we read it, last time we were taking in stories, we did one of his ghost stories from his book, Stranger Than Fiction, A Skeptic's Journey. And now when you say, like, are you going to call the authorities or whatnot? With this particular story, this happened with people on like an Air Force base. So when they talk about calling the authorities, I mean, they are the authorities. They are the people you would call when something like this goes down. And I know that Chuck himself is working on another book about ghost stories that happen to law enforcement officers. And
awesome. So I love books like that.
Yeah, and but this is from Chuck's book, Stranger Than Fiction. He gave us permission to read a story, and let's get into it. So, stationed at McClellan Air Force Base. Now, this is McClellan AFB is in California. Now it's McClellan Park. It's not an Air Force base. It was decommissioned in 2003, but we're going to go back here a couple of decades, back to when Chuck was a younger man and stationed there. This is a story called The Phantom Rider. My best friend at McClellan was a sergeant, a few years older than me, who I worked with a lot. Freddie, as I'll call him now, had been in the USAF since he was 18 and had been stationed in Italy and Panama, as well as Nellis Air Force Base, not far from the infamous Area 51 so many ufologists are obsessed with. Having gone on the USAF at the age of 22, I tended to be older than most of the airmen of my rank, and as a result, ended up hanging out with guys my age or slightly older. Freddie and I worked well together and spent time together on duty at his house, where his wife and kids always welcomed me in. We spent a lot of time talking on duty, mostly about politics and religion, but eventually the subject turned to the paranormal. When he was stationed at Nellis Air Force Base, Freddie had often gotten an assignment working the bomb range. He explained that sightseers would occasionally come onto the vast base to catch a glimpse of aircraft and had to be chased away for their own safety. While it took me a while to get Freddie to talk about Nellis, the wait was well worth it, but surprisingly not about UFOs, but rather supernatural events. Freddie's first story involved the Phantom Rider, a motorcyclist who wore all black who could frequently be seen in the bomb range and had to be chased away. The problem was, no one could catch him. My friend had chased the rider several times, marveling at just how good this dirt biker was. In general, when such a chase was initiated, units would be advised to break off and let the rider go. This led Freddie to theorize the rider was not a civilian after all, but a member of the security forces for one of the many classified sites on Nellis. Sites he would not tell me about, but which many Air Force bases have. One day, however, Freddie decided he was going to find out for sure and would not give up his chase of the Phantom Rider. He pursued him through the desert, finally into a series of canyons that Freddie knew had no exit. As before, the rider was just a little faster and eventually got out of sight, rounding a corner and vanishing. When Freddie rounded the same corner, he was sure he'd have his prey cornered. But the small box canyon was empty. No rider, no body, no nothing. Freddie was baffled. There was simply no way out of the canyon. I asked if he was sure he'd not lost him somewhere else. Now, Freddie admitted that was a possibility, then proceeded to tell me about a nighttime pursuit of the rider, where again, he refused to give up, and it nearly cost him his life. This chase began with Freddie sighting what looked to be dual headlights, not the single headlight of a motorcycle, driving around in the desert at night. He responded to the area, lights flashing, and closing the distance, convinced that he could catch a car. The trespassers weren't giving up, though. They took off at high speed, trying to lose Freddie the same way the Phantom Rider had. While security police are the main security for Air Force bases, there are areas even they are not allowed to go. In Germany, we had a secure building used by the weapons inspectors that regularly went to the Soviet Union as part of the U.S.-USSR treaty. The building had its own security, who were decidedly not military. Similarly, in California, we had a few interesting buildings that we didn't have security clearances to enter. I would imagine every Air Force base is like this, and Nellis was no exception, with large areas marked off as a no-go, even for the SPs, the security people. Freddy's chase covered a large area, but eventually turned south when the trespassers made a beeline for one of the off-limit areas. Eddie knew he wasn't supposed to enter those areas, but he wasn't ready to give up. Freddy knew he wasn't supposed to enter those areas, but he wasn't ready to give up. He maintained his pursuit, his target always just far enough away that he couldn't make out any detail between the two lights it had. Suddenly, Freddy's partner yelled out. Freddy saw the danger and slammed on his brakes, barely stopping at the edge of a canyon. He had almost driven off a cliff in his mad pursuit of the mysterious intruders. But worse than crash he had narrowly avoided, Freddy was baffled to see that the two lights he had been chasing didn't crash. They continued on, as if driving on a flat surface, completely defying gravity. Freddy watched in disbelief as the lights curved around, suspended in the air, then came back towards him where he had stopped. The lights came almost close enough to make out details, but then abruptly turned again, one going to the left, the other two to the right. They streaked away rapidly, fading from sight as he watched them.
That's awesome.
Right. So we have like phantom lights being chased by the military at Nellis Air Force Base.
Wild.
Yeah. I'm like, good story, Chuck.
Yeah. And if you like that story, the whole book is really good. There's a ton of just interesting, weird stuff. And you can get it on Kindle for like $2.
Yeah. It's completely worth the money.
Yeah.
So that does remind me of the story I was going to tell.
Yes.
So I think it's a good segue.
Let's hurry.
So unfortunately, I wish this was my story. It's not. I was an editor on a movie, and the director was Chris Hatton, and this actually happened to his friend. So we can trace the lineage. It's not a totally lost friend of a friend generation story. So the story goes that this man and his wife were in Vegas for a vacation for a week. And, if you're in Vegas for a week, sometimes you just need a vacation from Vegas. It's a bit intense. So, the man said, well, I've never been this close to Area 51. Let's, I know we can't go in, but let's just see how close we can get and see what we can see. And his wife really wasn't into it, but she went along for it because what are you going to do? And they drive out there, and it's not that close to Vegas. It's still a couple-hour drive into the darkness of the desert. And as they're getting closer and closer, they're on this lonely, dark desert road, totally alone, or so they seemed. And frequently, suddenly headlights would turn on right behind them, and then a black SUV with blacked out windows would speed by. And they always took that to be like, hey, we are watching you. We can see you when you can't see us. It was kind of a warning from the security staff around Area 51. So I'm like, all right. Well, we're just driving down the road. And unbelievably, they end up seeing more than they could ever have wished to see. Because they see a light on the side of the road at ground level. And then they come up on it and they see it's in a full UFO parked in the desert, not that far off the road. And there's just like you would.
When you say a UFO.
Flying saucer.
A craft.
A craft, yes. Yeah, because it's not flying at that point. It's an unidentified parked object.
But it's saucer-shaped?
A saucer-shaped object, and just like you would draw it up in a comic book or some 1950s idea, the ramp is down, and there's alien beings removing boxes and cargo from this ship. And so they're sitting there just dumbfounded watching this. And then suddenly, a bright ball of light appears in front of their car. And it kind of just hovers like over the hood, and it starts to drift away from them. And so the guy puts the vehicle back in gear and starts to follow this orb, and it accelerates, and he accelerates, and suddenly he finds himself going over 100 miles an hour, chasing this ball of light down this desert road, and then the light shuts off. Oh, what the hell was that? So he turns around to go back, and now the craft has moved way further off the road, but he can still see way in the distance that there's something going on. This craft is still there. And that's when he realized, though, that and obviously he doesn't know, is this a government thing or is this an alien thing? But he thought
a Hollywood movie thing.
Probably not that.
Sounds like Mars Attacks.
Yeah, totally. But it's at that point that he realized that this orb that he was chasing after was probably just meant to lure him away, and it did its job. And so that also is wondering. He wonders, is that an alien thing or is that a government thing? I don't know. It was just so fast. The thing that really boggles my mind, though, and you don't really know unless you're the one there, you want to see a UFO, and boom, you're watching a UFO and aliens, and then something else distracts you and draws your attention away. And I think, Mike, it takes me back also to you talking about the weird cloud that unnerved you in some way. That's not natural. That's not just, that's something, there's something suspicious about it. However, you then got distracted by the other stuff around you. So you do wonder if there's some sort of a psychic impression, little mind control, whatever you want to say.
Something, some force out there lulling us into complacency.
Well, yes, and Scott, that's a really great point. I mean, that idea. First of all, you see something, you're like, oh, that's weird, and then like that was like it's one of the most beautiful places in the Caribbean. So of course I'm gonna be like, oh, look at the water, like it. But this makes me think about probably one of the most compelling UFO stories that I'd ever heard, and this is from Brad from Canada, who's a Facebook friend. And we met Brad at the Michigan Paranormal Conference. And
that's great.
And so Brad, his particular story was that he was out camping, like in the wilds of Canada, with his husband, and they're out there, and they wake up in the middle of the night, and hear some weird stuff, and then they go out, just outside their tent, and they look up in the sky and they see the stars moving. And he's like, dude, because he'll drink a beer or whatever, but like a couple beers are not going to make the stars move.
Right.
And he's like, yeah, the stars were moving and we just saw them. He said, we watched it for a half an hour and then we went back in the tent and went back to bed. And we didn't talk about it. We didn't talk about it for a while. And then, like, one day we just kind of remembered it and started talking about it. Like, remember we woke up in the middle of the night and watched the stars? Like, dance? And his husband was like, yeah, I do. And they had this shared experience where it seemed like at the time, they're like, this is an incredible, amazing experience. And afterwards, they kind of forgot about it. Like you just finished watching an episode of the X-Files, or you just finished watching a TV show. And it's that kind of thing that we say, like, distracted by something.
Yeah. Or compartmentalized, or like that there's some architects of our reality, like makes me think of the movie Dark City, where, you start to have an inkling that there's some kind of artificial machinations behind everything that you see. And then once you get that inkling, these aliens come by and go, sleep now. That's it. You're like, I got to go to work. Hey, what time is it? And you're just back to normalcy.
And, that's the idea of the machinery elves, the people working behind the scenes. That's obviously something that people who have done a lot of LSD talk about. But that also doesn't mean that there isn't something to it. My theory, of course, is that, we'll see something amazing or something will happen, and then we'll forget about it or something, or it'll just like kind of fade into the background, and that's the machinery elves coming in and reprogramming us. They're knocking us out with the smell of sulfur, as Joshua Cutchin talks about, the smell of sulfur, brimstone. If you guys don't know what sulfur smells like, eat a bunch of eggs and then gas a bunch, and then you'll know.
It smells like a fart.
Right. Okay. I'm trying to get my 3-year-old not to say fart, Allison. So.
Oh, sorry.
Right. We prefer the term toot. So it smells like a toot.
She's going to be studying this carefully, this episode.
It just makes me laugh because she'll be like, I farted. And I'll be like, we say I tooted, excuse me. And, but either way, or what I meant to say was that smell of sulfur comes in, it knocks us, it knocks us out and puts us in a program mode. And then they come in, they fix whatever's wrong with our equipment, and then they leave. And then we're like, I saw Bigfoot.
Yeah.
So we don't know, because we're just watching it on the film, but Men in Black, those flashlights, also emitted a sulfur smell.
There you go. Yeah. You have to see the 4D version to get that.
Yeah.
But, that makes, to me, that idea makes sense, though. That idea that, when we think about program mode, because we talk about hypnosis, we talk about hallucinogenic, not necessarily hallucinogenic, but we talk about, hallucinogenic drugs. We talk about meditation. You say that these are the things that can help you change your neural pathways. And so we're talking about all these shortcuts to changing your neural pathways. Well, what if some of those shortcuts end up being, somebody giving us new programming? Because a lot of it is what it is programming. And so I just think it's an interesting thing.
We know that the olfactory sense is deeply connected with memory. So there's that.
Yes. Right. Well, olfactory with memory, and plus olfactory with, we can only recognize so many smells. And so the fact that everybody knows the sulfur egg smell, I'm not saying that it's aliens, but it's aliens.
Yeah. Because everybody's not your relative, so they wouldn't really know what sulfur smells like, you would think. 'Cause they're not...
They're not the Sunspot fan for hours.
So, hey, Rachel, who we've seen in Michigan and Chicago. Cheers to you, Rachel. Kind of like everyone is looking at COVID-19 right now. Oh, well, we don't know what's going to happen yet with that. And no one wants to hear what I think about COVID-19, so we're going to move past that, Rachel. Christine, I love you too. I'm not sure which pairing you're talking about, but it doesn't matter because we love you as well. So cheers to you, Christine. Dan says he's got an account written by an Elmwood Park police officer during the 1950s where they spotted a UFO over Elmwood Park Cemetery near Chicago. Well, that sounds like
Dan showed me that the handwritten report, and the great thing about it is in the description it uses the word sunspot.
Looks like now I believe it.
Yeah.
Well, the other funny thing about that is just the fact that it was Elmwood. And
Elmwood, Wisconsin.
Yeah, the UFO capital of the world.
One of the UFO
capitals of the world. Yeah, that's true.
Let's not forget about Belleville, Wisconsin.
Oh, that's right. And Dundee.
Yeah.
UFO days.
Wisconsin has 3 UFO capitals of the world.
Right.
I've got a couple more things to talk about, but I want to make sure we talk about. Let's visit our Patreon, Ned. He had a UFO experience back in the 1960s. And so we want to make sure we talk about Ned's thing. And so let's go listen to it right now, everybody.
Yay, Dr. Ned!
The thing that I've never been really one to see unusual things. I did see a possible UFO in 1965 or so at summer camp. It was up in the sky. Just lights spinning around that couldn't be anything we know on this planet.
Okay, lights spinning around that we couldn't see on this planet at summer camp in 1965. So
cool.
And and also I think Ned sent a message too, right? I don't know if he went into more depth about it, but the idea, he's a cardiologist. Ned's not like he's kind of a wild man. Because he knows how to have beer. But the thing is that strange, brief lights in the sky that did a fast circle that no jet could do. No crafts were seen. It was a clear sky at summer camp. He was outside walking. And so it's nice always to see when you talk about scientists, like the guy that has to take care of your heart, Ned, that he could see a UFO and you'd be like, okay, Ned, I believe you. I still need you to make sure I'm breathing tomorrow. But it's that particular kind of thing. So thanks for the story, Dr. Ned. We appreciate that. Obviously, in every podcast, you get a shout out. So I'm going to give you a shout out. Shout out right now and a 1, 2, 3 oofda to you.
Oofda.
Oofda.
Some more interesting things. So when we were using Twitter to promote the podcast, I would tweet out to people and who used to either like Darkness Radio or like Coast to Coast AM or anything like that. And I would just say like, hey, if you like those kind of things, let me introduce you to our podcast, See on the Other Side, where we write songs. Because George Norrie, Dave Schrader, Tim, they're all nice guys, but they ain't singing for you. Wendy and I are.
They don't know how to write a song.
Right. So like
live.
So I talked to this guy named Michael Fricker, and he's up in Alberta, Canada. So he's up there in the Great White North. And he sends me like he just emails me and he's like, hey, I know we saw each other on Twitter, but I just want to let you know that I've had a lot of weird experiences happening to me. And he sends me a PDF file called Glimpses into My Twilight Zone. And so one of the interesting stories I thought was good was called Chalk Rings in the Sky. I was living in the trailer court in the town of Dominion near the beach with a dirt road running down the middle. This is in Canada. So Dominion, probably a lot of maple syrup, and the Mackenzie brothers live up there. On a warm, sunny summer day, I was playing with a friend, and he had to go home or something for a few minutes. While he was gone, I stood in the center of the road and looked up at the puffy clouds above. There I saw what appeared to be a series of concentric white chalk rings, reminding me of a coil stovetop burner. When I picture that, I picture think about like a cartoon or whatever, with the like a stovetop burner like going and like the little rings popping up from it. So that's what I was thinking there for that stovetop thing. So that's what I envisioned, was the little rings popping out like little smoke rings in the sky. Silently it moved between the clouds, the space between rings the same blue as the sky. It went into a cloud and then reappeared, moving east, always appearing as a flat circle, until it silently flashed away, becoming small so quick it almost seemed to vanish. I watched it to reappear for a while, but then my friend startled me by calling my name from behind. I turned and asked him if he had seen the rings. He had no idea what I was talking about and wondered where I'd been. He had been looking for me for something like 5 to 10 minutes, including looking on the road. I have no memory of leaving it. It was the following year that I learned the term UFO, and I heard about Project Blue Book. Although I've looked and kept my ears open, it was only until a couple of years ago that I'd met someone who'd said they'd seen similar rings to that one. So I was like, okay, when I first read this story, I was like, okay, he saw some rings in the sky. And then he's like, and then my friend said, I couldn't find you. And I'm like,
yeah.
So then we got missing time.
Wow.
Yeah, I love that.
Now but stories like this are what make me think about the machinery elves and make me think about the programming, and we only see what we think we're going to see. This is from his childhood. And he doesn't connect it. He just says, like, I've seen a bunch of weird stuff. He doesn't connect it in this way, but my earliest memory is waking up sometime after midnight in my grandparents' house in Neels Harbor at the age of 3. Moonlight or streetlight came through the only window. My room was in back, containing stairs to the ground floor, and the room my parents were using as their bedroom. So I get up and I try to walk into my parents' room, and I stand there in the dark until my father wakes up enough to notice me and tells me to go back to bed. I turn around, and I came face to face with Grover from Sesame Street. Standing there completely solid and slightly taller than me. He smiled and seemed friendly and harmless, so I started talking to him. My father asked what I was doing, and I told him who I was talking to, and he just told me to go to bed. So I told Grover good night. I walked around him and back to bed. When I was 21 and living in Banff, Alberta, my roommates called me Grover because I reminded them of him. Okay, that connection at the end is specious.
Well, also, so Grover, are you saying Grover's an alien?
No, but I am not saying Grover's an alien, but I'm saying that.
I'm just wondering how that related to the UFO topic.
I think it was the idea that he's seen weird stuff all of his life. And when he was, the first memory is him seeing Grover as a real creature in his father's and mother's room. And then later on, he sees rings in the sky and disappears. And he's got several other things. They weren't necessarily UFO things, but I was trying.
But they could be. They could be screen memories, like of course, the famous Whitley Strieber and Communion talks about seeing owls all his life as from childhood on, seeing owls in weird places. And then at some point he realizes they aren't owls. This is just the camouflage that the aliens use. Right. They put up something I'd be familiar with in place of an image of what they really look like, which would terrify me.
So that story, the Grover story, reminded me so much. Jeff Lord, I shouldn't out him his full name, but he was a guy that I did some of my first paranormal investigating with. He talked about, as a little kid, probably the same age, seeing a little creature that looked like E.T., and it had a syringe, though. And it would kind of like stand over his head and slowly release the syringe so that a single drop of something would come down and hit his forehead, and then he would be totally paralyzed. Oh. So, and it's interesting when you were a little child dealing with these things. Yeah, I know. And then what after that? Cool at all. He said he would feel the tingle sensation throughout his body and just was totally paralyzed. Now, as a little kid, are you like just trying to associate, like, okay, this thing looks kind of like this thing I've seen on this TV show, so therefore now it is Grover, now it is E.T. Were they actually being visited? Who the hell knows? But very wild. And I have to ask, I see a comment here, Rachel Meyer, my mom's alien was like a blue big bird. Your mom must be Bonnie Meyer. Is that correct, Rachel? Who is a amazing contactee who has been up in crafts, and I have interviewed her on my old show in Kenosha on the Mothership Connection. If that's true, we should talk.
We've seen Rachel at the Chicago Paracon and so if her mom's Bonnie Meyer, that's pretty sweet. Is Bonnie Meyer from the Fox Valley?
I don't know where she's from.
Well, we'll have to hear more about the big blue bird. Everybody's interested in the big blue bird.
Yeah.
Yes, it's her mom.
That's all. Small world. How about that?
All right. It is a very small world.
Wow, that is very cool. But all these stories that we've just touched on now, they sound a lot like alien abductee stories. There's just many.
Yes.
Stories just like this from experiencers world over.
So Kathleen says, reminds me of the Day of the Moon episode where you forgot the aliens as soon as you turned away. The silence.
Oh, man.
Yes, actually,
so
that's
good.
And I love the first two episodes of series 6 of the Doctor Who reboot. Obviously, are fantastic. And Day of the Moon and the Impossible Astronaut are classic. But yeah, that idea though that. You forget about them. That's the Men in Black. That's the little thing that smells like sulfur. So the Men in Black fart on you and you forget you just talked to them. Yes, that's my mom, and they're from Menasha. All right, that's awesome. Next time we see you, Rachel, we're gonna have a beer and we're gonna talk more about this because I want to hear what it's like to grow up like that, because. Our parents never saw UFOs and didn't believe in it one bit. Christine says she had a dream. I remember from when I was a kid about hand puppets coming in my room and talking to me. I told them I had to go to the bathroom, and they said if I get out of bed, they would kill me, and they left.
That's horrible.
I didn't get up, and I woke up in the AM and really had to pee.
Aw, poor kid.
Those are terrible hand puppets. That is so sad.
Those are the evil hand puppets.
That's right. So it's something like this. Christine, we're going to kill you. Ah!
Okay. Thanks.
Thanks, Allison.
Thanks
that was beautiful.
We didn't
For
know.
that brilliant. It's very accurate.
She's got hand puppets with her. That's the best part.
Are you trying to reactivate the trauma?
Yeah. Some hand puppets.
All right.
I think we got some great listener stories plus personal stories. I mean, it was fun to go back, and I had a UFO story I didn't even know about. Is there anything else anybody wants to particularly talk about today? We're already at an hour 20, so.
Wow. I think, we might have to do this again. And just,
I love hearing these stories.
I do too. We're gonna
Dan sent his stories, but we're so far over. They're really good, so we should do a part 2.
We could do a follow-up.
Yeah,
definitely. And we should encourage people, if you have any strange stories, we love strange stories of every stripe. That's why the number to call them in is 414-40 for Charles Fort, who loved Fortiana. That's what the anomalies of life of any variety. He loved them all. We do too. So call in your stories to 414-FORTEAN, and the number is once again 414-367-8326.
All right.
So call in to 414-40, and then we're going to do this again in an upcoming episode where we're going to get in everybody's, maybe we've done ghosts, we've done UFOs. Maybe we should look for, maybe we'll just take in a grab bag of stories. And if we get them far enough advance, we'll have a chance to kind of do research and see what kind of similar stories there were.
Yeah, during that time. So if you have a date, if you have a time of year, make sure to leave as much information as you. If you cut off by the recording, just call on back and we can knit the story together. So you can call anytime. We have this line open all the time for your stories. So please call day or night and just leave your messages on my voicemail, 414-40, and then we'll be able to retrieve them. If you leave your contact information, we can call you if you have any questions. But, feel free to leave everything right on the message there. And you can leave several messages.
We'll stitch them
we just want to hear your stories.
We've got the science to stitch them together.
Yeah.
You can also email them if you don't feel like talking.
And we'll read them aloud. Obviously, we can do a dramatic reading. And if we have enough time, we'll put in some sound effects too. Anyway.
Yeah, so we love your stories of aliens, of UFOs, Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster, ghosts, things that you just don't know what they are.
Right.
Just, call those in. Maybe you had a pressing ghost experience where at night you've been overcome by sleep paralysis, but it doesn't seem quite like that is enough of an explanation. Those are great stories that
we love the old hags
as well.
We love old hags here on the See on the Other Side podcast and American Ghost Walks and What's Your Ghost Story and everybody. I just had a really good time today talking with you guys, and it was fun putting out these old stories. And everybody who's been joining us live, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we'll probably do this again next week at the same time if it works for everybody. And we'll keep on. Everybody's stuck at home, so let's keep on. Keep
Let me check my
weird.
schedule.
Yeah. Right?
Keep those stories coming.
And keep staying weird because even though I know it's a very strange time for everybody, that doesn't mean the ghosts and the aliens and that Bigfoot don't have corona. So he's still out there too. So you guys have a great week. We'll talk to you soon. If you haven't heard the podcast yet, OtherSidePodcast.com, and we can spend more time together there. And then call in your stories to 414-40, and you can always check us out and let us know what kind of weird stuff you enjoy. And we'll talk to you on the other side.